Hi there everyone, this is Dr. Dino. Now I've been on a bit of a human evolution arc lately. I think it's about time for a break. So today, I'm coming to you with a short response video to a video published by Standing for Truth, titled, Did Dinosaurs Have Feathers? Experts Respond. Now, those of you who've seen me on Donny's streams know that he and I disagree on a lot of things, but this video isn't intended to be antagonistic or hateful, or anything like that. I just want to address some of the things that are said here. For context, the original video is a cut from one of Donny's streams. Oh, and I'll also be looking into these experts and their claims, because I feel it's important to fact-check things, you know? Make sure you aren't spreading misinformation. And I won't be addressing any of their religious claims unless what they say directly contradicts the evidence we have. With all that out of the way, let's meet our experts. First up, we have Donny, Mr. Standing for Truth himself. Donny is a young Earth creationist preacher who tries to use scientific evidence to support his beliefs. He doesn't always understand what his sources are trying to say, and some of those sources can be a little unreliable. But I don't think he's a bad dude. As for the experts he's brought on, all of them work for Creation Research, an Australia-based young Earth creationist foundation, so keep that in mind. This isn't to poison the well, but I feel it's important to know where they're coming from. In the top right is Diane Eager. She used to lecture about medicine at the University of Canberra. Nowadays, she is an intelligent design advocate with some traditional views on gender. To the bottom left is Joseph Hubbard, who has a bachelor's degree in paleobiology. He uses his credentials in his writings and speeches for the UK branch of Creation Research. He's also the one we'll be hearing the most from today. And lastly, we have John McKay. He's been in this business since the 80s, and his last publications appear to be from 1985, co-published with Andrew Snelling about flood geology. So we have a rather star-studded cast. Let's see how up-to-date they are with their research.
Here's the first one, and I think it's a good question to ask because it is kind of a hot topic, maybe a controversial one currently in the world of young Earth creation. Did any of the dinosaurs, specifically one that you pointed to, John, in your presentation, such as Velociraptor, have feathers? Actually, if I could add a little bit more details to that, I've heard many, some even in the young Earth creation camp, that would look to Sinosauropteryx, and they'll point to the fuzzy filaments that many would purport basically help that specific creature with warmth, but they would consider that a dinosaur with feathers. So what's a good response to that?
Okay, Velociraptor and Sinosauropteryx, two interesting dinosaurs, one of which we have indirect evidence of feathers for, and the other has them blatantly preserved all over its body. Let's see what they have to say.
Okay, well, if you're dealing with a creature like Velociraptor, the total amount of feathers that we found on any Velociraptor fossil is 0. There's not even any fuzzy filaments, even if you wanted to interpret it as the fuzzy filaments as feathers.
Now this is true. We don't have any feather impressions preserved from Velociraptor. However, we do have evidence of feathers on the bones, and direct evidence of feathers in other dromaeosaurs, the group that Velociraptor belongs to. Here are some fossils of various paraves, or bird-like dinosaurs, that had feathers. Not just downy fluff, mind you. Many of them had full-on pennaceous flight feathers on their arms, tails, some even had them on their legs. And here are some dromaeosaurids. Many of them are also in rocks of around the same age, and rather nearby to where we find Velociraptor remains. So if all of them obviously have feathers, but Velociraptor doesn't, it's kind of odd that it'd be an outlier. Now, an important question to ask yourself in this discussion is not, did this specific dinosaur have feathers? But rather, did the fossils we have form in a situation that would be good for preserving the feathers? Feathers are delicate and easy to destroy. They're made of keratin, a material that can degrade in a matter of weeks. Bones, meanwhile, can last decades in some environments. It's also really easy for feathers to wash away during decomposition. Most of the dinosaurs I've shown here were preserved after dying mid-flight above stagnant water, or died while swimming in stagnant water, or they were buried rapidly, but gently, limiting the access scavengers had to the corpse. They're also all preserved in fine-grained sediments, which are really good at preserving small details. Compare this to where we find Velociraptor, in a desert. specifically the Djokta Formation of Mongolia, which is mainly composed of rough-grained sand. Sorry, little tangent there. What were we talking about?
So with Velociraptor, that's that, and it's also the same with many of the other sort of macro dinosaurs. So you'll find that there's a current trend to depict T-Rex kind of covered in downy feathers or fuzzy or something like that.
Oh boy, yes and no. There was a big craze of portraying adult T-Rex covered in feathers that started in the early 2010s and died out after a couple years. As for the current science on the topic, paleontologists for the most part don't think adult T-Rex had many feathers. Maybe a few for display, but not many beyond that. We do, however, feel there's a pretty good chance that the chicks had feathery coatings when they were born, which became more and more sparse as they aged. We base this on early tyrannosaurs, almost all having feathers of some sort on their body. You can see it here with Dilong and Eutyrannus. Now T-Rex as an adult was much bigger than both of them, but the babies were only 2 to 3 feet long. A nice coating of fluff would probably have helped them keep warm during the night.
Listening to a lecture by a fairly now well-known paleontologist, although he wasn't as well-known back then, and he'd just published a new book on the dinosaurs of the UK. Fabulous book, really well researched, and many of his depictions of the larger theropod dinosaurs in the likes of T-Rex and whatnot were covered in these downy feathers. And I asked him straight up, I said, as far as I'm aware, there's no fossil evidence of dinosaurs with these feathers. Am I missing something? Why have you depicted all these? He said, no, there aren't any fossil feathers on these larger dinosaurs, but we know that they evolved into birds, so we assume that they had them. So you're really dealing with an assumption. Assumption there, and it does show you that creationists are often accused of being having presuppositions or being biased. And yes, we do have presuppositions, and yes, we're biased, but then so does every single other scientist who's ever done any science.
Now yes, every person is going to have their own biases, but a big part of good science is reducing the impact your bias has on your interpretation of the evidence. In most cases, we try not to extrapolate more than absolutely necessary. If you don't have evidence to support one of your points, then you will be called out on it in the scientific community. We also do our best to form our opinions based on the evidence we have, rather than trying to find evidence to support our pre-existing opinions. Until the discovery of small bird-like dinosaurs, most scientists saw them as slow, lumbering beasts. It was the discovery of new evidence that changed our minds, such as new isotope analyses letting us determine the body temperature of dinosaurs, showing that even some of the bigger, slower ones still had a high bird-like body temperature, as well as a rapid metabolism. New evidence changes our perception of the world around us, but we do our best to minimize preconceptions in our interpretations, unless they're supported by the evidence.
We know that there are fully formed birds in the Jurassic. Case in point, Archaeopteryx. All right. And by the way, that's not creationist research that determined that. It was Natural History Museum research. Big prestigious place in London. Mentioned it earlier. They have some of the best preserved Archaeopteryx fossils, including the original one that Sir Richard Owen examined, and they ended up doing a number of tests, including taking scans of the brain capacity, and a reptile brain and a bird brain are very, very different, and they were hoping to find something in between, right? A transitional fossil. Now, it turns out that not only is it fully feathered, with fully functioning feathers, with hollow bones, it also has a bird's brain, right? Which is very, very specific for birds, because you've not only got the control of the flight, you've also got the gyroscope that's in there and all this other kind of components of bird brains which are unique to birds because of needing to fly, right? And so even by secular standards, Archaeopteryx is a fully formed bird.
Okay, a lot to go over there. First off, saying that there are many differences between a bird brain and a reptile brain. Well, which birds and which reptiles are you talking about? Because for some reptiles, like geckos or alligators, I'd agree. But for others, like plenty of dinosaurs, I wouldn't. Here's a little diagram of some dinosaur brains. All of these are carnivorous dinosaurs, and from left to right, their bodies are more and more bird-like. As you can see, Deinonychus here is pretty similar to Archaeopteryx. Or at least, it's more similar to Archaeopteryx than it is to, say, Allosaurus. And here's an image that highlights analogous parts of the brain in different fossils. And as we can see, Archaeopteryx is not only similar to a dinosaur like Zanabazar, but also quite similar to a modern rhea. And here from the same study, we can see how Archaeopteryx and Ichthyornis, both of which they accept as being birds, are quite different from other modern birds, like the bullfinch. So what I'm trying to get at here is that there's a lot of variation within birds, and some of these bird brains are more similar to dinosaur brains than they are to other birds. Gee, I wonder why. Oh yeah, and he said something about us thinking Archaeopteryx's brain would be in between dinosaurs and birds, then said its brain was entirely bird-like. I think he might be lying.
This is 200 million years old in the Jurassic.
It's around 150 million years old, thanks.
Before dinosaurs were supposed to have started evolving into birds. So there's a number of issues when you try and present these, feather fossils or individual feathered fossils as being dinosaur feathers. There really isn't any evidence, and it's only circumstantial at best.
So, from the very beginning of Dinosauria, about 230 million years ago, we've had small dinosaurs. Some, like Eoraptor, were about Archaeopteryx sized. And like I said earlier, when we find new evidence, we can change our worldview. Now we keep finding older and older bird-like dinosaurs, or just straight up birds. So what? That just means that we've had birds for longer than previously thought. Not only that, but it seems that dinosaurs evolved flight more than once, and in different ways. Heck, one group, the Scansoriopterids, went the bat route to getting flight, with long extended fingers connected by a wing membrane.
There are some other fossils which are more complete, right? So complete dinosaur skeletons, which have been purported in the past to be feathered dinosaurs. Now, some of them are straight up fakes, but then that always comes and science usually clears that up pretty quickly. That's fine. I believe one of them was called Microraptor at one point.
Oh, so you do know about other feathered dinosaurs. Oh, lovely. And you're right, there have been fakes. Not Microraptor, though. You're thinking of Archaeopteryx, which was a very crude fake fossil that was 3 or 4 different species crammed together.
But then there are some of these other dinosaurs, like Sinosauropteryx, which we have a cast of in our museum collection, and a few others, which have these appearances of feathers. And I know that Diane's spoken about this before, so I'll hand over to her in a minute. But you can basically categorize them down into 2 simple things. Either they are hardly anything similar to feathers. So, I mean, all the feathers that we've found, including the ones in the fossil record and the ones in the amber, they are clearly feathers, right? They have the barbules. They are fully formed, fully functioning feathers. Yet you don't find this in the case of like Sinosauropteryx. There's something fuzzy going on there, but there's no real structure to them. So the simplest and quite frankly, what the evidence certainly seems to lead to is these being decayed collagen fragments, right, off of keratin, off of scales, which we know dinosaurs had because we find fossil skin impressions with scales. And it also makes sense because, well, what happens to your skin and nails when you soak them in water for too long in the bath, right? They start to go a little bit fuzzy. So it makes sense that if you have a creature that's been suspended in water for a long time, that's what would happen to it. And again, go back to the flood.
Yay, we're talking about Sinosauropteryx. And misrepresenting it. Now, Alan Fiducia, back in the early 2000s, thought that the dark lines above the spine of the type specimen might be decayed collagen fibers. This was based on low-quality photos he had seen. However, this idea has been refuted by several studies performed on the actual specimen. As an example, we have this study performed by Smithwick and colleagues. It pointed out that not only did the structures on Sinosauropteryx have, well, an internal structure, but they also have preserved melanosomes, which are organelles found within melanocytes, or pigment-bearing cells, which are not found in collagen fibers. Not only that, but the preserved structures form patterns over the body, giving the specimen a raccoon-like mask, a pale underbelly, and a ringed tail. If these were just preserved collagen fibers, they wouldn't form distinct patterns like this. which we see on multiple specimens of Sinosauropteryx. Lastly, we have birds preserved in the same rock layers as these Sinosauropteryx, whose feathers have preserved in a similar way. So please, stop saying they're collagen fibers. They aren't. Structurally and substantively, they're not collagen. And anyone who actually read anything having to do with the topic should know this. Especially someone who has a degree in paleobiology, who should know to look into claims like this before repeating them. And before someone says that this study might be brand new and maybe he just hasn't seen it yet, this stream took place in spring of 2023. The study was published in 2017. He's had 6 years to read it, and more for other studies which only corroborate its findings. If he isn't lying here, he's simply misinformed, and he should have read up on the topic.
Or you have cases where, because they've been found in rocks that are supposed to be of dinosaur age, and they do have fully formed feathers, they're regarded as dinosaurs, when the reality is you could just as easily interpret them as a bird. It's just that it doesn't fit in with the evolutionary time frame. So there's a few thoughts on feathered dinosaurs there, but yes, as you say, it is controversial.
Okay, 1, no. We know that there were birds that lived alongside bird-like dinosaurs. 2, the current consensus is not contentious at all. Almost every paleontologist that works with dinosaurs and/or birds acknowledges that birds are a type of dinosaur, just like sauropods or tyrannosaurs are types of dinosaurs. Birds are just one small group of dinosaurs that managed to survive past the Cretaceous mass extinction. Also, he mentioned the flood of Noah a moment ago. Nothing in geology supports a global flood, but that's an entirely different discussion.
We have another website called Ask John Mackay, which is questions and answers, and we did get the inevitable question about feathered dinosaurs. There is a little picture of Sinosauropteryx there, which you can see is clearly a dinosaur, but there is a sort of row of fuzz along its back. And if you have a look at that closely, and there are better pictures than the one that's on our website, it is just fuzz, it's just filaments. And even some of the evolutionists will admit that. A well-known paleontologist who's an expert on birds, Alan Fiducia, wrote that these are not feathers, it's bits of flayed skin, in other words, decaying skin. Now, in your skin, underneath the outside layer, there is a sort of whole felt work of fibers which literally holds your skin together. So if you have an animal that's been drowned and in the water and starting to decay, those filaments do start to come apart. And then if it's buried rapidly, those filaments will be preserved. Their structure will be preserved.
I was going to ask if that stuff was fuzz or collagen, but she cleared it up. And yes, collagen fibers can be preserved. However, as previously stated, we can very easily tell the difference. Also, she's bringing up that paper that was authored by Fiducia. That was from 2005. Not only that, but most of the data is based on poor quality photographs of different dinosaur specimens. Heck, in the paper they mistake preparation grooves, so grooves carved during fossil preparation, for preserved integument. It's a rough read all around, honestly. Also, she rags on scientists admitting that the structures on Sinosauropteryx are just filaments. Of course, we admit they're just filaments. They're extremely basic feathers. Feathers come in multiple types, even in modern birds. Down is a completely different structure from a flight feather, and what's found in Sinosauropteryx is analogous to extremely primitive down. It's honestly more like fur than it is feathers at this point.
So in our question there, we just get you to think. We like to get people to think and just ask 2 questions. Are they really feathers? Now, where they have these actually attached to a skeleton, they are just filaments. The feathers, the things that are found as feathers, like the ones that are entrapped in amber, or sometimes as isolated feathers buried in the rocks, they are separate from the skeletons, and they are fully formed feathers. So are they actually feathers when you find them attached to a dinosaur? And the answer is no.
Right, except for Enrahonavis, Scansoriopteryx, Anchiornis, Epidixoteryx, Yi, Kaihong, Archaeopteryx, Darlong, Zhenwanlong, Changuraptor, Microraptor, and Sinornithosaurus, among many others.
The other
Yeah.
question you need to ask is the specimen actually a dinosaur? And the classic example, of course, is Archaeopteryx, which has been classified as a dinosaur, but it is very clearly a bird.
Yes, Archaeopteryx is a bird. And a dinosaur. The two are not mutually exclusive. One is just a category within the other group. All dinosaurs share certain features. Those features being reduced or absent fourth and fifth fingers, reduced or absent first and fifth toes. They all have a hole in the rear part of the jaw, and one between the eye and nose. They all have 3 or more vertebrae that are fused to form a sacrum between the hips. They all have a hip socket that is an open hole between the femurs. They all have a specific ankle joint known as a mesotarsal joint. And they all have a fourth trochanter, which is a muscle attachment site on the femur. And guess what? Archaeopteryx has all of these features. Heck, Archaeopteryx even has that infamous raptor toe claw. And we can nest this bird with other dinosaurs, because it shares every single one of these features with dinosaurs that these people all say are not birds. Archaeopteryx can fly. That's about all that sets it apart from your average small carnivorous dinosaur. Thank you for showing that neither of you know what dinosaurs or birds are. And that's where we'll leave off for this video. Honestly, it was kind of fun to refute creationists in my personal wheelhouse. I like dinosaurs. I like birds. And I hate it when people like this misuse science to mislead people. Birds are dinosaurs. Get over it. I don't know why they're still so obstinate about this, why they can't just accept it. It really is just shoving their fingers in their ears and ignoring the evidence when it's sitting right in front of them at this point. Can't wait for them to accept it in the future, like they've had to do on so many topics in the sciences. And thanks for joining me today, folks. If you like what I do, please do the normal YouTube things. If you really like what I do, then I have a Patreon. The link is on screen and in the description. Lowest tier is only $1 a month, and it gives you access to all my videos without ads as soon as they're finished. Special thanks to my $5 patron, Ember. And even if you don't join me there, thanks for watching and supporting me. See you later.